The sound of zippers and hurried footsteps fills the bus station in Ouagadougou. Mothers hug their sons a little tighter. Fathers adjust the straps on their daughters' backpacks. There is no music, no parade, just 60,000 young men and women preparing to leave home for something they don't fully understand. For the next 30 days, they will have no phones, no distractions, and no comfort. Only one goal: to be shaped into something greater than themselves. This is not a military draft. It's a national experiment. Perhaps the boldest Burkina Faso has ever attempted. President Ibrahim Traoré has launched the first patriotic immersion in African history, training a generation not with rifles, but with stories, sweat, and shared struggle. These young people won't be marching into war, but into villages, schools, and history itself. In an era when foreign powers still tug at Africa's seams and terrorism creeps into quiet towns, Traoré is betting on something deeper than drones or diplomacy. He is betting on unity. Among the crowd, a girl named Nafisatu folds a borrowed raincoat. "Not everyone can afford the gear," she whispers. "I just hope no one gets left behind." In another corner, Axel dreams of starting a business when he returns. "This isn't just about Burkina Faso today," he says. "It's about who we become tomorrow." Their voices echo a question far beyond their borders. Can a country save itself from within? If you believe Africa's future lies not in foreign hands but in its own heart, this is a story you need to hear. Stay with us, because what's happening right now in Burkina Faso could reshape how we define national defense and how we prepare the next generation for the world ahead. Across Burkina Faso, the hum of a quiet revolution is growing louder, not through protests or political speeches, but through the sound of 60,000 footsteps. From dusty border towns to lush southern villages, young graduates gather at converted schools and community halls. The Patriotic Immersion, launched on August 10, 2025, is not a youth camp. It is a national blueprint, carefully crafted by President Ibrahim Traoré, to turn students into pillars of civic strength. For 30 days, these participants live together. No phones, no internet, no family visits. Just a shared mission: to understand what it means to belong to something bigger than themselves. Each morning begins with the national anthem, sung as the flag rises against the waking sky. Some students rub sleep from their eyes. Others stand tall, hand over heart. After that, they begin their physical training. Not to become soldiers, but to discover discipline. They run laps, stretch in unison, and push each other past their limits. Instructors don't shout commands. They lead by example, often wearing sports gear, not military uniforms. Afternoons bring the heartbeat of history. In one classroom, an elderly veteran recounts the country's long road to independence. In another, a historian unfolds a map of the ancient Mossi kingdoms. Students don't just memorize dates. They learn stories. Stories of resistance, of rebuilding, of identity. They begin to see themselves not as scattered individuals, but as heirs to a greater legacy. Later in the day, groups split into community service teams. In one province, young hands patch the walls of a crumbling schoolhouse. In another, they clear drainage channels to prevent flooding. What once felt like chores now feel like ownership. A girl who used to write essays about nation building now digs through red clay, smiling through the sweat. "We're not cleaning," she says. "We're preparing this place for the next child." Each activity is carefully designed. Students rotate roles weekly. Today, you carry tools. Tomorrow, you lead the team. This is not about creating followers. It's about creating leaders who understand responsibility, not just authority. Evenings shift to life-saving skills: how to purify water, deliver first aid, organize relief after a storm. One instructor, a retired paramedic, tells them, "You may never see battle, but you might be the only help your village has when disaster strikes." His words hang heavy in the humid air. The program's design is deliberate. It blends youth from every region. A boy from the arid Sahel shares a bunk with a girl from the green hills of the Southwest. At first, they swap stories of farming and festivals. By the end of the week, they defend each other's hometowns like their own. And there are names, real names. Nafisatu, who dreams of seeing her country for the first time beyond textbooks. Axel, who sketches business plans between drills. Fauci, who admits her fear but shows up every morning. Sadek, who stands tall reminding his peers, "We must be ready for whatever comes." It's not just the physical exercises or the historical lessons. It's the rhythm of shared meals, the late-night talks in shared dormitories, the laughter after a long day of repairs. These young people aren't just learning how to serve. They're learning how to belong. Still, there are challenges. Some dorms lack enough beds. Supplies run thin in rural zones. Rain delays outdoor drills. And yet, these obstacles become part of the learning. One group, faced with a chair shortage, turns the problem into a woodworking class. Within days, they've built seating for everyone. The numbers are staggering. 60,000 youths, 13 regions, over 300 sites, no Western donor. Every meal, mattress, and uniform organized by the state or local supporters. Some call it an administrative miracle. Others call it a risk. But for Traoré, it is a necessary evolution. A defense network made not of soldiers, but of citizens. But what happens when the rains grow heavier? The risks grow real and comfort fades. Will this generation stand united? Or will the cracks begin to show? The rains came earlier than expected, and harder than most could handle. In the northern province of Soum, what was meant to be a training ground turned into a swamp overnight. Classrooms meant for lectures were now shelters from storms. At one site, the electricity failed. Buckets lined hallways, catching water from leaking roofs. A shipment of food was stuck behind a washed-out bridge. Hunger crept in with the mud. For many of the 60,000 participants, this was their first time far from home. Now, they were sharing flooded dormitories, cold rice, and sleepless nights under dripping ceilings. And yet, something remarkable happened. No one left. Instead, they adapted. At one camp, youths joined locals to dig new drainage channels, barefoot in the mud, laughing as rain splashed their uniforms. In another, a shortage of furniture sparked an impromptu carpentry workshop. Within days, they'd built chairs and desks from salvaged wood. They weren't waiting for solutions. They were becoming them. But the emotional weight was heavier to carry. Some cried quietly at night, missing the comfort of home. Others grew frustrated, struggling with routines stricter than any school they'd known. The counselors, trained for this, stepped in. Each evening, they hosted reflection circles. No lectures, just stories, laughter, tears, bonding. That's where the shift began. A girl from the West who had never shared a room with strangers told a boy from the North, "I never knew your region had schools like this." He replied, "I didn't know your people ate with so much spice." They both laughed, and something ancient, distrust passed down through generations, began to dissolve. Parents across the country followed updates anxiously. Radio stations aired interviews with participants. One mother in Bobo Dioulasso said, "I feared this program at first. Now, I hear my daughter's voice, and I hear pride." A father in Kaya admitted, "My son never made his bed at home. Now he's teaching others to fold sheets." There were no parades, no media spectacles, just quiet moments of transformation. Meanwhile, in government offices, concerns grew. Could the state sustain this scale? Were they ready if terror groups targeted the camps? In some regions, military escorts were added. Local defense teams patrolled perimeter fences. The students weren't being turned into soldiers, but they were being taught what readiness looks like. President Traoré made a rare public address during the third week of the program. He didn't use big words or promises. He simply said, "What we're building here is not temporary. These are the roots of a new Burkina Faso." The world began to notice. A foreign diplomat, speaking anonymously, said, "There's nothing like this anywhere else in Africa." Some Western outlets questioned the motives. Was this civilian training or political indoctrination? But inside the camps, the youths had no time for politics. They were too busy learning to trust, to lead, and to endure. Sadek Parka, a soft-spoken boy from the East, shared his thoughts during a nightly circle. "I used to think strength was about lifting weight. Now I see it's carrying each other." The most powerful reactions came not from officials, but from the youth themselves. One girl asked her counselor, "When this ends, can we come back next year?" Not because it was easy, but because for the first time she felt essential. This wasn't just a month of training. It was a collision between the ideal and the real. Plans met potholes. Discipline met fatigue. Hope met hardship. And through it all, a generation met itself, somewhere between failure and resilience. But as the month draws to a close and the buses prepare to roll again, a deeper question rises. Will this unity survive beyond the campfires and flag-raising, or will it fade once the noise of normal life returns? When the final whistle blows and the uniforms are packed away, the question isn't whether the youth survived the 30 days, but what they bring back with them. The answer, according to teachers, parents, and local leaders, is both visible and profound. In a farming village outside Tenkodogo, a group of students returned home and immediately began repairing a community well that had been broken for years. "We don't wait anymore," said one of them. "We fix what needs fixing." Indori, a young woman who once avoided public speaking, is now organizing hygiene workshops for neighborhood mothers. She laughs and says, "They used to call me shy. Now I lead." Across the country, the ripple effect is undeniable. Young people are showing up at town hall meetings. They're volunteering in schools, helping build latrines, starting youth cooperatives. Some are planting trees. Others are organizing reading circles. For the first time, many feel not like passengers in the system, but like drivers of change. A survey conducted just 2 weeks after the immersion ended showed a 42% increase in youth participation in civic activities across 5 regions. Community leaders say discipline has improved, as has cooperation among young people from previously divided ethnic backgrounds. "This is not just unity," said a village chief in Gawa. "This is healing." The psychological impact is harder to measure, but just as real. In interviews, students spoke of a newfound sense of identity, not just as individuals, but as threads in a national fabric. One participant said, "Before, I thought I was just from my village. Now I know I belong to all of Burkina Faso." This emotional shift is no accident. Traoré's government designed the program not just to teach history, but to write a new chapter of it, one in which the youth become both memory and muscle, where the past is not just remembered, but carried forward in action. On the political stage, the implications are significant. By activating 60,000 educated citizens, Traoré has created what some analysts call a civilian backbone. These aren't party loyalists. They aren't soldiers, but they are prepared. In a country where instability has often created vacuums of power, this immersion has filled one of the most critical gaps: national cohesion. Opposition voices have raised questions. Is this a form of state conditioning? Is Traoré building a soft power militia under the guise of patriotism? But for many citizens, the answers matter less than the results. A grandmother in Fatangurma put it simply, "My grandson came back with calloused hands, a straight back, and a plan for his village. Whatever they taught him, it worked." The political mood is shifting. For decades, young people were seen as restless, unemployed, or disengaged. Now they're viewed as assets. And that shift is slowly changing how power flows. Local mayors are meeting with returned participants. Ministries are offering small grants for community-led projects. Traoré's cabinet has pledged to expand the program yearly. But the transformation isn't just happening in the halls of government. It's happening in households. In one home, a father who once doubted the president now wears a pin of the national flag. He says, "If this is the future my son is walking into, I can breathe a little easier." In another, a mother gathers neighbors every weekend to hear her daughter speak about health and hygiene. "She used to speak only when spoken to," the mother says, smiling. "Now she teaches." The nation is not just witnessing a shift in energy. It's witnessing a shift in trust. Trust that citizens can protect each other. Trust that unity is possible. Trust that leadership can start from the bottom. But as this sense of power spreads, so does another question. Can the political system handle a generation that no longer waits for permission to lead? In embassies across West Africa, lights burned late into the night. Diplomats watched with quiet curiosity and growing concern as news of Burkina Faso's patriotic immersion spread beyond its borders. In Mali and Niger, government officials sent observers to witness the experiment firsthand. They returned not with critiques, but with questions. Could this model work here? Could a civilian corps trained in patriotism and resilience become the region's greatest defense against insurgency and foreign influence? The answer was unsettling, because it was yes. Washington, too, took notice. Analysts at the State Department quietly flagged the program as strategically innovative. A confidential policy brief described it as an emerging model of grassroots stabilization. But behind those diplomatic phrases lies a deeper worry. Burkina Faso just mobilized 60,000 young people, trained them in civic cohesion, and did it without a single dollar of Western aid. That's not just rare. That's revolutionary. For decades, international security frameworks in Africa have depended on external funding, military advisors, and foreign oversight. But here was a country saying, "We'll train our own. We'll feed our own. We'll defend our own." It was a quiet rejection, not of cooperation, but of dependency. Within NATO circles, questions began to circulate. What happens if this spreads? If more Sahel nations follow suit, will we see a shift from Western-aligned militaries to self-reliant civilian networks? Is this the birth of an indigenous defense infrastructure, one built not on contracts and weapons, but on culture and conviction? So far, the U.S. has made no public statement. But insiders say this silence is strategic. Acknowledge it, and you validate it. Ignore it, and you risk falling behind a new African narrative. But beneath the diplomacy and strategy lies a more human question. If Burkina Faso can build national unity without weapons or money from abroad, what excuse do wealthier nations have for not trying the same? On the surface, the Patriotic Immersion looks like a bold civic experiment. A month of training to build discipline, unity, and national pride. But beneath the surface, some believe something else is taking shape. Something bigger, something hidden. A growing number of political analysts, regional observers, and even insiders within the Burkinabe bureaucracy whisper a theory. This isn't just training citizens. This is building a decentralized national defense force, without calling it one. The signs, they say, are everywhere. Uniforms without insignia. Morning drills conducted by instructors with military backgrounds. Strategic placement of participants in every region of the country. Rotating leadership exercises, emergency simulations, and perimeter security protocols. These are not common in civic programs. These are the foundations of readiness. Then there's the timing. Just as French troops withdraw and Western funding dries up, Traoré quietly rolls out the largest coordinated civilian operation in Burkina Faso's modern history. No press conference, no foreign consultants, no applause. Just buses, bunk beds, and a plan. Add to that the curriculum. History that emphasizes anti-colonial resistance, practical survival skills, and region-wide resourcefulness. One observer remarked, "If you stripped away the word immersion and called this a resilience battalion, no one would question it." And the most intriguing detail? The program's scalability. With 60,000 participants in the first cohort and promises of annual expansion, Traoré could theoretically train over 500,000 youth within a decade, every one of them ready to serve their community in times of crisis. Or, as some suspect, ready for something more. One source inside a regional governor's office stated anonymously, "These aren't just students anymore. They're a force. Quiet, disciplined, unarmed, but trained." None of this has been confirmed, of course. The government maintains that the program is strictly educational. But the line between civic pride and strategic preparation has never been thinner. And that raises the question, if this is not an army, why does it look so much like one? As the final days of the immersion program arrive, the camps begin to quiet. The drills soften. The last lessons are taught. The uniforms, still dusty, are folded one last time. And then the buses arrive. 60,000 young people, now changed in ways only they fully understand, board those buses not just as students, but as witnesses to a national awakening. But the work is not over. In fact, it's only begun. Burkina Faso remains surrounded by uncertainty. The Sahel region is volatile. Terrorist networks evolve. Droughts and floods test infrastructure. The same communities these youth now return to still face poverty, disinformation, and political tension. And yet something is different. Because now, each village has someone who knows how to organize relief after a storm. Each town has someone who understands leadership, hygiene, and national history. Each family has one more reason to hope. Still, the risks remain. If unity fades, if politics corrupt the vision, if fear outweighs purpose, this moment could slip away like many before it. That's the warning. But here's the promise. If nurtured, this generation could be Africa's strongest firewall, not built of steel, but of service, memory, and conviction. And in a world where borders mean less than the bonds between people, that may be the defense we've always needed. So now, the question is yours. If your country asked for just 30 days of your comfort to help build a future stronger than the past, would you say yes? Let us know in the comments. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a question, a sense of responsibility, hold on to it. Share it with someone who still believes in community, in dignity, in rising together. And if you pray, whisper one tonight for the youth of Burkina Faso, who chose sweat over silence, service over safety, and unity over fear. May God bless Africa. May He bless the hands that rebuild it. And may He guide us all toward the strength to answer when our time comes.